Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to our second online Scotch tasting. I'm Kyle with Andrew Hilton, and I'm joined tonight by Reed Pettit from Southern Glazers, or rather the National Brand Ambassador for Remy Cointreau. Good evening, Reed.
Oh, sorry, I was muted there. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, yeah. So Bruichladdich a product line that we've been working with really as long as I've been with the store. I can remember for a very long time having, an entire wall shelf that was just Bruichladdich special editions, and then the entire shelf underneath was just Murray McDavid expressions. Now, obviously, the range has gotten slightly smaller these days, but we've got a really, really interesting lineup between the classic Laddie and then the 3 barley expressions, as well as the Port Charlotte. We talked about doing an Octomore, but at the end of the day, it didn't quite work out. I think everybody here has a rough idea of my history with Bruichladdich just from kind of hanging out with me and me boasting about getting to spend a week at the distillery. I really never shut up about that. So why don't you introduce yourself and talk about your history with the distillery. For those of you who did buy the Bruichladdich Classic Laddie, the Scottish Barley, we are going to start with that just because it is the core expression. For those of you who have the core kit, don't worry, we are going to get to that very quickly. But I just wanted to start here and get us rolling. Reed, why don't you take us through your history with Bruichladdich?
Yeah, I understand what it means to brag about going there. Once you've been once, you'll continue to talk about it the rest of your life. I started with Bruichladdich 5 years ago, almost. I think my first time over to the island was probably 5 years ago, about like this week. I started out as a national brand ambassador for Canada. Since then, I've kind of taken on a lot of the work in North America and helped them launch some of the new SKUs. One of the best parts about Bruichladdich is when you go over there, when you work for the company, they truly do take your input on things. So there's myself in Canada. There's about 17 or 18 of us that do this job around the world for this distillery, and we get together about once, twice a year at the distillery for our brand summits. We go through meetings with everybody from the distillers, Adam Hannett, when it was Jim McEwen, everybody that works in the warehouses, everybody that works in the shops, Mary McGregor, anybody you can think of that works in the distillery, we're there hanging out with them. And we're trying new things. We're testing things that are in barrels that may be released. We're talking about ideas for packaging, for new bottles, the new Port Charlotte bottles you guys will see or you guys have now. That was something that we've been working on for years. And the distillery actually took the input from us very well, which is, it's nice to see because I have a lot of colleagues, I guess, or friends that work for other brands across the world. And I think for the most part, a lot of people that work for brands are just sort of like a billboard for them. They don't really feel like they're a part of a brand or part of a family. And with Bruichladdich, it's one of those things that I feel proud about everything we do because everybody that works for this company has some sort of an input on what goes out and what gets put in a bottle. Now, that being said, if you don't like something, don't blame me.
Fair enough. And, I'll echo that. When I went over in 2008, I was a 26-year-old kid. Like, I really had, I had a lot of experience selling Scotch on the retail side, but I hadn't been doing this all that long. And they were incredibly respectful. They treated me no different than if I was like, a major buyer from, say, New York or Chicago. I was treated incredibly well. And yeah, just everything was, this is what we're doing, this is what we are. You want to taste something out of this barrel? You can go ahead. It was literally just, they gave me a barrel thief and they turned me loose in the warehouse and said,
that's the thing.
Don't drink too much, basically. It was amazing.
That's the thing. We do, it's when you go there, and I've been on a lot of distillery tours around the world, and not just in Scotland, but in France and Barbados and everywhere. And it's everywhere you go, there's always some sort of closely guarded secret, or there's signs that say, don't take pictures of this, or you're wearing hard hats and you're tied together with a buddy system. You can't go through certain doors. And Bruichladdich is just sort of a free for all. You show up, and if you walk up to the distillery at 1 a.m. and you walk into the still room with a cup of coffee for Budgie or something like that, he'll let you just sit down and hang out with him while he's distilling. Like, it's a very open doors, nothing kind of hidden. We're very transparent. That's at the core of what we do, is transparency. And it starts with the distillery itself and translates very clearly into the whiskeys.
I think it's kind of funny that you're not required to wear a hard hat or anything, because that mill, the malt mill at the distillery, is the most wildly dangerous looking thing I think I've ever seen in my life.
I'm sure it could take a limb off or two if you got a little bit too close to it. But it's one of those things. I think it wasn't the last time, maybe a few times, a year or two ago, I was over there and they had the American whatever sales team up. So they had all these new people that worked for Remy Cointreau in the States. They had them over and they had myself over and our ambassador from Germany, Evolve, because we're the two of the longest standing ambassadors for the company. And we were over there to kind of teach them everything about what we do and how to kind of translate that back to their jobs. And I was sitting in the still room with a group of them. And as soon as we walked in, Budgie, one of our stillmen, was like, listen, if a fire alarm goes off, somebody run over to this kind of like crankshaft right here and just turn it as fast as you can to the right. And it's a long shot. It's not going to happen. It's a fire distillery is the last possible thing you want. And 20 minutes later, the fire alarm goes off. There was no fire, but the fire alarm went off. Somebody jumped over part of the still, grabbed it, started cranking it to the right, turned it off, and we all ran out to the street right next to Lockendall. And then it's Islay, so the fire department's volunteer, and it's not the biggest island anyways, but a lot of the roads are single lane. So it took a while for them to get here. We stood out in the freezing cold for a little while before we go back in and finish making whiskey.
I mean, there's still the one little cafe store that has about 20 square feet of retail space that's just a little down the road there. You could have gone in there, or is that even?
Yeah,
still
if you
there?
need anything from an espresso in the morning to a bag of chips to a bottle of whiskey, you can go into that store and find it. But there's also the house right next to it is for sale in case anybody's interested.
I definitely cannot afford a house on Islay.
You can do sweat equity. You can work it off.
Why don't you start us in on the classic Laddie here, and we'll get rolling.
Yeah, can anybody see, am I visible at all or no?
Oh no, everybody can see you. You just can't see
Okay,
us.
perfect. I've just been doing hand signals here, and I wasn't sure.
No,
I'm glad I'm wearing a shirt.
Good.
So the classic Laddie here, which some of you will have, we're going to get into. I guess I should open mine. This is a newish bottle, I suppose. This is sort of like the core range of what we do at Bruichladdich. And when we first started creating it, a lot of people gave us a little bit of flack because we're on Islay, and this is an unpeated whiskey. And out of the whiskeys we're having here today, 4 of the 5 are unpeated whiskeys. And Islay being a home of peated whiskeys, people kind of didn't really take to that so well. It's a very proud sort of preaching point to say that an Islay whiskey is a heavily peated, smoky whiskey. And we kind of came out of the gates and we're like, well, I think we can prove something else about Islay whiskey that's not just about smoke. It's not a flavor profile in our minds. It's a place. It's a place where people live, where people work, where people grow up, where they go to school, where they fall in love. It's a place and not just a flavor profile. And we want to kind of steer people in that direction. So the classic Laddie is behind everything we do at Bruichladdich. It's all based off of basically this bottle here. And I don't know if you could do me a favor, because I know we're drinking different bottles of the classic Laddie, because mine has been sitting in my cabinet. But on the back of the bottle, in little tiny numbers,
Yep.
I guess it might be on the side, way down here kind of thing.
I've got it.
There should be, I need the code, the 18/018 or whatever it is.
I get 19304.
19304. So here's a little secret about what we do at Bruichladdich. If you are bottling a whiskey, and anybody's bottling a single malt whiskey, you're only allowed to state the youngest whiskey inside the bottle. That becomes your age statement kind of thing. You'll notice on a lot of our bottles, we don't really do age statements. If we do, they're very small around the side. It's not something we preach about. We don't think it's the very most important thing when it comes to making whiskey. We do believe that maturation plays an integral part in the flavor of whiskey, but we don't believe people's decisions should be based off of a big number on the front. So we kind of hid our secret on the side. So could you give me that number one more time?
Yeah, it's 19304.
19304. So we hit a little Easter egg on all of our bottles on Classic Laddie. And if you punch in that little number on the side of your bottle on our website, it'll take you to the exact recipe of every single thing that's inside of this bottle. So right now, when you're looking at it, so it's technically we wanted to put it on the bottle. Originally, we had planned to put our entire recipe on the bottle, but we were shut down. We weren't allowed to by the the Scotch Whisky Association,
you can just go rogue like what is it? Is Loch
Compass Box went a little rogue. We like them. Kilhuman's gone a little rogue. We've still gone a little rogue, but we don't have the time to be caught up in lawsuits all the time. So sometimes we play by the rules. But the Scotch Whisky Association, like you may know, but some other people might not know, is this big overseeing conglomerate of lawmakers and whiskey distillers and producers, and they keep the laws and what you can do with whiskey. A lot of them are good. A lot of the whiskey or the laws are great, but a lot of them are kind of infringe on our beliefs. So we believe you should be able to tell people everything that's inside your whiskey, and we've put that out there for everybody to see. So I'll just read off what's in the one you guys will be drinking if you have it. So it is a vatting of 75 casks, 4 vintages, 3 barley types, and 11 cask types. Everything from barley grown on Scottish mainland, finish in Spanish sherry butts. We have Islay Barley, which is done in French Pomerol, fantastic wine. American First Fill Bourbon, Scottish mainland from 2012, and French Pouillac, again, an unbelievable style of wine. So when you look at Classic Laddie, right away you just think, here's an unpeated whiskey. You don't think it has all these layers to it. It doesn't have a number on the front of it. You're a little bit worried about it. There's nothing kind of out there. But we are a distillery that believes in transparency above all else. So we'll give you everything. So we've hidden all these things on the side. So I guess we should drink a little bit while we're talking about this. If you guys have the Classic Laddie, feel free to jump in.
Absolutely.
But you'll notice right away, it's light in color. It's a straw, sort of golden color. It's not really dark, not really like amber to it. It's light. You'll notice in the palate, it's a little bit oily. It's a little bit hot. So these two things are sort of synonymous with Bruichladdich whiskeys across the board. And for the most part, it's the one we'll start with, obviously, the color. And when you guys are tasting whiskey, the first thing people do all the time is they pick it up and they swirl it around and they put on a really pretentious, like, tasting face, a wine tasting face. My favorite one is this. It looks like you know what you're looking at.
Tragically, your video cut out there for a minute, so we actually cannot see your hilarious wine tasting face.
Well, it's this. I'll try to do another one.
It'll get caught up again.
Okay,
your audio is still great, though, so we'll keep on rolling.
Sounds good.
One question I did want to jump in is one difference I've noticed, and I don't know if this is just since the Remy Cointreau acquisition, but I know that the core Laddie expressions always were 46, and I noticed now they're all kind of starting at 50, which is more something I'd kind of come to expect.
They are
from,
50, yeah.
Hunter
So
Lang Old Malt cask style.
Yeah, so to get into that, so when I was talking about the color, what people do when they look at it, the first thing they do is they nose it, they smell it, and they look at it, they stare at it, they put on their pretentious face, and they look at the color, they pretend to know what they're looking at. But for the most part, when you're drinking single malt whiskey around the world, that color is a lie. It's bullshit, because a lot of the times distilleries put E150 caramel colored in their whiskey. So it's the same food coloring that's in Coca-Cola. It's just E150D, and Coca-Cola uses E150A. So it's the same dog food, it's just a different grade. And the whole reason distilleries will add this coloring is they'll tell you it's for consistency, because they want their whiskeys to look consistent on shelves year after year after year. And we know that consumers and people, whiskey drinkers, have been fed sort of ideas and thoughts about whiskey throughout their lives, and people have grown to think that the darker a whiskey, the better.
I was always told that it was because of jealousy about how bourbon and brandy looked in like print ads in magazines.
Very much like
Scotch
that, yeah.
Looked much paler in the magazine, so they started coloring it when print ads started to become a thing in the 1960s. And before that, it wasn't colored at all.
Exactly, it never was, and now it's been colored and kind of like, and it's just sort of like a lie in a glass. And it's half the reason we put the Classic Laddie is inside of a bottle you can't see through. You can't see the color of the whiskey right away. So we'll always, every single whiskey we make, we never add E150. It's all natural coloring. We'll never add any color to it. And on a part, when we're talking about the percentage of it being 50%, when this industry standard for whiskey is 40%. If you turn around to that shelf behind you, probably 80% of them are 40%, maybe. I'm sure you have some nice cask ones in there too.
90%.
Maybe not yours, but
so yeah,
there you go.
Your typical airport duty free, sure.
Yeah, any your regular big corporate whiskey makers are bottling things at 40%, And in order to get your whiskey to 40%, you need to strip out oils inside of it. And here's when we're distilling whiskey, as all single malt whiskey distilleries do, we use these big, beautiful copper pot stills. And they can be the tallest, the shortest, the fattest, the thinnest, the oldest, the newest, the whatever. They're all fantastic because they're all made from copper. The copper is lending these oils to these whiskeys. When you're making an old fashioned and you express the orange peel in the bottom of the glass, or when you're making a mojito and you slap them in to release the oils, you're doing that to release flavor. And all these companies are distilling with these copper pot stills and bragging about them. And then as soon as the whiskey's about to go from barrel to bottle, they strip out all the oils so they can bottle their whiskey at a lower ABV and keep it clear so it doesn't go cloudy. If you taste a copper pot vodka like an Absolute Elixir or a Tito's, you notice it's more tannic, it's more oily, it makes your cheeks sweat a little bit. If there's flavor, thing with whiskey. And if you want a bottle of whiskey at 40% and you leave those oils inside, it'll be cloudy. So there's this sort of magic number that floats around 45, 46%, where it's not going to go cloudy at all. And if you can leave those oils in, it has to be at least 45% and up, and your whiskey's still going to be clear. So we will always bottle things above 45% because we never want to strip the oils out of our whiskey, because that's where flavor lives. We want to keep as much flavor as we possibly can.
Jim McEwen's experience in like the independent bottling realm, because that was before Bruichladdich went and changed everything starting in 2001 and basically started the idea of a distillery bottling with the same best practices as an independent bottler. Was that Jim's kind of influence in coming to it with a very independent bottler's mindset? Because that hasn't changed.
He had been sort of, obviously Jim is a legend in the whiskey world, and if they were going to build a statue out of anybody, it should probably be him. And he's been working in whiskey since he was before he was a teenager. And when he was running as a master distiller for Bowmore, he was sort of bound to their rules and regulations and certain things that they would do. And when he was approached by Mark and Simon to come over and take over Bruichladdich, it was sort of a, hey, here's this new, from 1881, this new distillery that's all yours. Do whatever you want with it. And so you have this rogue kind of guy like Jim McEwen, who is an absolute maniac, giving free run of a Victorian era distillery and saying, do whatever you want. And then he just goes and creates the most untraditionally traditional whiskey you possibly can. Like, we're talking, and you've seen it, the old stills, we were talking about the mill, everything, our mash tun.
How about the mash tun with those giant
the open air mash
tun,
which we've broken before, making Bere Barley. We broke those rakes, which I'll get into when we get there. But this is old Victorian distillery putting old traditional style whiskey in Tiffany blue bottles, and people are getting upset about the color. And they're not thinking past it and
listening to our comments, they have no issue with the color, but they want a stripe down the side that's clear so they can tell how much is left.
For inventory, I know, believe me. Here's how I do. I just turn it all upside down over a glass, and then when no more comes out, I buy another one.
That seems reasonable, yes. Actually, I want to get to the comments a little bit here as we're going along. Dawn has a really old bottle. She's got a cognac cask matured, distilled in 1990 as an 18-year. I remember having that on our own shelves. That was really cool. Anybody else got? I think Sheila's gotten herself into the Bruichladdich Black Arts, which is a wonderful whiskey. It's no Blacker Still, but it's a lovely whiskey.
It's no Blacker Still, but it's a lovely whiskey. The new Black Art 8 was just announced today. Bruichladdich announced it. I tried it, I guess, like right before this pandemic, maybe 8-9 months ago. Tried it straight out of the barrel, and they just announced its release, so that should be hitting shelves pretty soon.
Beautiful. I'm going to put a question out to the crowd here. For us to get Reed back on video, we're going to have to restart Skype. Would everybody be cool if we took like 2 minutes where Reed wasn't with us to get the video back? Because that's about how long it would take. Just going to watch the comments here. We'll see how that goes. We'll kind of let people come to a decision on that here real quick. Yeah.
Have I disappeared here?
Your video's been off for a little while. Your audio sounds great, but yeah, we haven't had your video since about 5 minutes ago. So that's all right. We'll put it to the crowd. And
you guys missed all my dancing.
Delay, so.
You missed all his dancing.
Oh, we missed the dancing. Actually, hilariously, when we had Brett Rowland from Averill Creek Wines out in BC on. He actually didn't know he was on camera or on video for about the first 40 minutes of the tasting. So he was playing with his dog and walking around and everything else. And it's funny. It's like, oh yeah, does anybody want to like ask questions about the dog? And he's like, how do you know about the dog? It's like, oh, you've been on camera for like 45 minutes, man. So that was very funny. And yeah, everybody is super good with just restarting the Skype call. So we're going to do that now. And while we're waiting for that, I'm going to break with tradition. I'm going to very quickly talk about the upcoming beer tastings. That's a nice bit of just housekeeping that you don't need to listen to because you probably don't care. So we'll be back with you in a minute. Okay, so as promised, we are going to talk about our upcoming beer tasting. That is coming up this Wednesday. Again, thank you everybody for bearing with us for a week's delay. I really didn't want to do a beer tasting on Remembrance Day. It felt more than a little disrespectful. So, yes, as promised 2 weeks ago, this is our West Coast, Best Coast tasting. It's going to be a little bit of a historical retrospective on IPAs in Alberta. As I said, I couldn't get any Tree Hophead for this one, but I was able to get the Red Racer IPA. I was able to get the Fat Tug IPA, as well as two brand new ones, Cabin's Seasons Pass, as well as the Reinhard Armed in Citra. Also, speaking of Cabin, I am going to Calgary tomorrow. The roads are actually good enough for a change. And we have Reed's video back. That's great. And I am picking up, I think, 6 new beers. So Cabin's got a new IPA and a new chocolate chili stout and a new golden ale. Annex has a Vienna lager. 88 actually I didn't pick up. They dropped off this morning. They dropped off their Warp Whistle, their Honey New England IPA. And then finally from Establishment, actually nothing new from Establishment, just Establishment continuing to be awesome. But welcome back, Reed. Nice to see you again. This is good. We have video. It has. It's been too long, really. All right, let us jump into the smaller bottles that everybody has at home. So which of these are we starting with, sir? The Cognac region, yeah. And actually, I'll jump in there for a second. Actually, there's been a huge push in Cognac, just like with, whiskey distilleries starting to kind of rediscover that, the strain of barley matters. Godet Cognacs actually just launched a new 100% Fall Blanche Cognac, which I thought was really interesting. I love the idea that we're starting to see like single grape varietal brandies and cognacs re-entering the market. No, please do. This is a rant-friendly channel.
Even if they did like a single harvest or single distillation, it would technically have to be bottled as an eau de vie and wouldn't legally be allowed to be called a cognac then. So it would just be, they'd be creating a new category, which is fine because it'd be delicious, but it's all this like legal battle stuff that happens with all these like AOCs and things like that. But back into the whiskey, like I was just saying, when you're making cognac, the grapes come from cognac. When you're making Bordeaux, they come from Bordeaux. When you're making tequila, the agave comes from tequila. When you're making Scotch whiskey, people think that the barley comes from Scotland, but for 85 to 90% of it, it doesn't. It comes from England and Canada and Australia and all over the place. And
Ukraine,
it's just bought on the open market, right? Like it's bought as a commodity for yield. So if you and I owned a distillery and we wanted to save a bunch of money, what we would do is we would wait till the price of barley fluctuates. It goes down a little bit. You buy as much barley as you possibly can without knowing anything about it. You distill as much as you can to get as much liquid as you possibly can.
Oh, sorry. Just going to cut in because your audio glitched for a little bit. We are on the Islay Barley 2010, folks.
Sorry, yeah, Islay Barley 2010. So if you and I bought a distillery and we wanted to make as much money, you bring in your barley from wherever without knowing what it is, where it came from. You have an idea of the strain of it, but you buy it because it's going to make you the most, because it's going to give you the biggest yield. And then you mash it, you mill it, you ferment it, you distill it, you ship it off the island, you send it over to a warehouse district outside of Glasgow, you let it sleep for 10, 12, 18 years. You take it out, you add a bunch of food coloring to it, you strip out all the oils, you add a bunch of water, you go down to 40%, you slap a label on it, and you make a bunch of money. That's whiskey making 101 right there, which is unfortunate because people don't buy their barley for flavor. They buy it for cost. They buy it for yield. They buy it as a tool. They don't understand that it's the main ingredient inside of single malt whiskey. That's what the word malt comes from, is malted barley. So people aren't buying their barley for the flavor of it, and it's upsetting to us because when you look at the world of wine, it's grape specific. The world of cognacs are grape specific. Everything is so specific to the ingredient. Yet the single malt whiskey world and the whiskey world in general sort of just overlooks it as it's just barley. It's just there to make alcohol. It's there for flavor. So you're going to notice here, tasting this classic Laddie first, if you had it, and then tasting this Islay Barley next, and across the next three, obviously a huge difference. And the number one difference in these whiskeys is the barley provenance.
Now, we've seen Bruichladdich really revolutionize almost every ingredient in terms of like the market. I mean, with your barley expressions, I mean, maybe Glenmorangie has done some heritage barley, and Macallan has kind of always claimed they use 100% Golden Promise, but really in terms of focusing on barley this way, Bruichladdich the first. In terms of barrel aging, you know, Jim McEwen's like additional cask enhancement, or ACE, as he used to call it.
Yeah, the ACE, yeah.
Which is unfortunately a term you guys don't even use anymore, which is a shame. But yeah, like that.
Well, we do. It's just a different. We just don't market it as that.
Sure.
But
like
even in this Islay Barley, like right now, it's been aced, right? So
Sure.
It's additional cask enhancement. So the Islay Barley right now, it's Islay Barley. I think it was Uxbridge varietals, maybe. I can't remember. That one's the 2010 Islay Barley. So 6 years old. That one's first fill bourbon, and then it's been aced in Juraçon and Reef Salts and Banyuls casks. So those are three like sweet French wines, right from the south of France, right on the edge of the border of Spain. And those are sweet fortified white wines. And though the whiskey sat in the next bourbon barrel and then been moved into those three barrels as well, and then sort of batted together to create what you're drinking now.
But where I was kind of going with this is because you've already kind of revolutionized all the other ingredients, is yeast next? Are we going to see a Bruichladdich wild yeast that's been collected from the air around the distilleries?
Yeah, we have plans for it. Right now we've been kind of set in using our Mary and Carey yeasts. Like we've been set with those. They've worked well for us, especially with what we do and sort of our yields and our style of whiskey. It's something we've thought about. We don't really have the technology to do our own sort of like individual special yeast yet, but that's just a couple of years ago, we didn't have an extra 2 warehouses on the island either. And in about a year, we're going to have our own malting floors as well. So it's things like this take time, but it's stuff we're definitely going to do. But we are trying to innovate as much as we possibly can across all realms of whiskey making, and not just single malt whiskey. Like we currently have rye being matured at distillery. So we have an Islay rye that's going to be coming out of barrels in, I guess, a couple of years, which is really exciting because it's the first time rye has been grown on Islay for a really long time.
Beautiful. Let's walk us through the Islay Barley here and how it varies from the Laddie Classic.
Yeah, like I said, it was matured in those French sweet wine casks, and you're going to get a little bit of that. But I think specifically, like, the one thing you're going to notice is a little bit more of like a salinity to it. So it has a little bit more kind of like saltiness on your lips when you taste it. It's just from its time being on Islay. All the barley's grown there on the island around the distillery. Yes, everything we do is on Islay, which a lot of distilleries out there can't actually say. We do everything from grain to glass, minus the maltings. We have to ship it off and ship it back on because we don't have the malting floor. Even with our Islay barley, it seems strange. We grow the Islay barley at Bruichladdich, we ship it over to the Highlands, and then it gets malted and sent back. Just because
you don't use the Port Ellen maltings?
No, we don't use Port Ellen maltings. We use Baird's maltings up in Inverness.
Okay. Any reason for that? The fact that Diageo is notoriously hard to work with.
Their Baird's is sort of like a small group that does a lot of fun things. They're open to our ideas.
Oh, okay, that's fair
So
enough.
when we approached them, it's like a family run operation. When we approached them and said, hey, we want the most unbelievably heaviest peated barley you can possibly give us, they were okay with doing something wild for us. So that's when we came out with the Octomore. But they're a great company. They're good people. They help us out along the road. They do small batches too, so you don't need to buy 60 tons of things. You can buy 7 tons for one run kind of stuff. When we first started, that's all we had the money for. We couldn't just go and buy all the barley in the world and then just hope to make a ton of whiskey. And everything we were doing was very experimental. So we had to buy small batches and test things out and see where we wanted to go, especially when we're doing things like these micro provenance things or the uber provenance, sort of like the growth series, where you're going to find the same style of barley grown in like 5 or 6 different regions of Scotland, and then all distilled and matured separately to see the variations in the taste profiles and how everything changes depending on the region of where that barley is grown. Not just the style of barley, but actually where it's grown, to kind of push our agenda a little bit more. That is, it matters where barley is grown. Barley matters, the place matters, the ethos matters, terroir matters.
Absolutely does, and I think you very definitely get a different character from the Islay Barley.
Yeah, you'll notice that it's that saltiness. I think it's a little bit sweeter. It just kind of has its own sort of life. And when you try, those of you that have the classic Laddie, when you try them side by side, you're going to notice a big difference. And yes, there are different casks involved. There are different maturation involved. But again, we've kept these whiskeys fairly young because we're not. I just keep staring at these whiskeys next to me because I'm excited for them. But we keep our whiskeys fairly young in a lot of these expressions when we're doing things that are barley focused. So when we're focusing on the Islay barley, and we really want you to think about the barley itself. Same thing with the organic. It's about organic barley. With the Bere Barley, it's about beer barley. When you have that name in there, we want you to taste the barley. And when you mature something for a little bit longer, you lose those kind of sweet notes that you get from the barley, from the cereal, from the grain. So when you first smell it, it smells like bread almost. And you taste it, and that's the barley, that's the raw ingredient. So we're keeping these a little bit younger to try to give you that flavor of barley over the flavor of the casks. But if we let these mature a little bit longer, you'd start to see them spread apart, or maybe kind of come together a little bit more, just because the cask would mellow out certain flavors that the barley has kind of holding there in front of you.
Because with whiskey, older absolutely is not always better.
Not at all. And slowly but surely, people are learning that just because it's older, it doesn't mean it's better. I've had a lot of really old whiskeys that I really didn't like, but that's okay.
Now, I have absolutely no issue with drinking straight 50% whiskey all night and it not bothering me at all, but I'm sure there are some folks who might be thinking about adding water to their whiskey tonight. Do you want to just touch on that briefly before we putter along and we go on to the Organic Barley 2009?
Yeah, I would. This is one of my favorite things in the world, actually. So we've all been that person at the bar where we've sat down at a whiskey bar, whether it's a place in Alberta or the Caledonian across the road from me or something like that, and you always sit down at the bar and there'll always be a guy next to you, and he'll get his whiskey glass and then he'll get a straw and he'll put one drop of water in his whiskey and he'll swirl it around and go, perfect, it just needs to open up. And I always roll my eyes at it because, like, I get it. Someone told you about that, and now you think one drop's going to open your whiskey up. And I don't mean to be mean or rude or anything, but it's going to vary for whiskey. It's not about opening up the whiskey. It's about bringing the whiskey down to a suitable drinking strength for yourself. A lot of people like drinking whiskey at 40%. We don't bottle at 40%, but a lot of people are used to drinking whiskey at 40%. So we encourage them, add some water to it.
I feel extremely called out by your one drop comment, by the way.
I knew somebody would, and I'm glad it's you. But here's the thing, and here's the reason behind it, is because Classic Laddie is 50%. Most of these across the board are 50%. If you add one drop of water to a 40% whiskey, okay, it's a little bit of a difference. If you add one drop of water to a 50% whiskey, not really. A cask strength whiskey, you get something like this Octomore, 63%, one drop of water. No, you want to find your strength that you like. If you like it at 50% or you like it at 40%, you add a little bit of water to a 50%. If you're drinking it a cask strength one, you add a little bit more water to try to bring it down to that 40%. It's about balancing the whiskey to your palate where you can enjoy it the most and you can get the most out of it. So you're going to taste the most because you're not being masked by ethanol and things like that. So you're just bringing the whiskey down to a proper drinking strength for yourself. So I encourage you to test out more than one drop, just do like 4 or like a bar spoon worth, like a teaspoon, something like that, and try to find it. And then you'll be like, hey, which one is this? Oh, it's a 55%. I'll add a teaspoon. Oh, it's only a 47%. I'll add 2 drops. And then you can become more pretentious.
Yes, you become even more insufferable, which is really the goal of anyone in the liquor industry.
That's the goal in anybody in the whiskey profession. Is that's it. They don't tell you that, like we pretend we don't like that, but when we're given these roles, we're brought into a specific club, and that club is to try to make whiskey as most pretentious as possible.
Absolutely it is, yes. Especially if you're a keeper of the Quake, because seriously,
hey,
I know a few, so.
Yeah, they're all good people. But that's the thing, is like we're trying to take that pretension out of whiskey. We're trying to bring it back to people and let them realize, like, listen, it's not just, it doesn't need to be a guy sitting in a leather chair with a cigar looking down on people kind of thing. It's just like, it's fermented barley water. It's not a big, we're farmers at the distillery. That's it. Like we're just making whiskey. It's not anything that needs to be, we don't have faux heritage. We don't have tartan print on things. We don't have like waves crashing off of rocks on our imagery and stuff like that, even though we did have a series called Waves and Rocks.
And Waves and Rocks, and yes, you did have waves crashing off of rocks.
It's unrelated, but here's the thing, is like...
And I really liked the waves. For what it's worth, I absolutely thought that was, I think back in the day, that was like $63, and it was absolutely amazing. We sold a couple cases of waves a week. It was
the Waves, Rocks, and Peat series sort of found their way into the PC series, which found their way into Port Charlotte, which then became Port Charlotte. So they all kind of grew into there. But just to touch briefly on the Islay factor of what you guys have in this first one is, yes, we're a distillery on Islay. Yes, we make unpeated whiskey. We also do make the most heavily peated whiskey in the world. But at the core of what we do is it all on the island. It's all at the distillery. It's everything. Maturing on Islay is rare. When you go to Kentucky, you see warehouses everywhere. Beam has warehouses all over. As far as the eye can see, it's warehouses. They're maturing their whiskey at their warehouses. When you go to Islay, which is the home, the heart of peated whiskey, where are the warehouses? You don't see them anywhere.
It's kind of amazing how few there are. And also, I had the good fortune to go to the Bruichladdich warehouses in Port Charlotte.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
I'm kind of amazed those buildings are still standing.
I give it a couple more years till they fall to the ground, but they're full of some beautiful whiskeys too. But that's the thing, is you look around and you're like, oh, they must be hidden, but they're just not. They're in Edinburgh and Glasgow and on the mainland. And when you look across the island and you see these 9 distilleries there, and you only see a couple warehouses at a few select ones, here's what happens: is a company will buy their barley from, we're at Canada. They'll bring it in, they'll bring it over to the island, they'll mill it there, they'll mash it, they'll ferment it, they'll distill it there, and then they'll put it on the back of a tanker truck, and they'll ship it over to Glasgow. They'll fill it in a barrel, and then they'll sleep in Glasgow off a highway for 16 years, and then they'll slap a tartan print on it, and they'll say Islay whiskey, and then they'll ship it around the world, and people will fall in love with it. And they'll use that name, Islay whiskey, when it's only been on the island for 5-6 days, maybe. At most, you've been there longer than most 16-year-old Islay whiskeys have, which is to say something. It's kind of, it pisses us off a little bit because, like I said, Islay's a place. Like it's a sense of people. It's a way of life. It's not just a flavor profile in whiskey. They should just be calling it Islay style whiskey, because it's really only spent less than a week of its time on Islay, and then you slap that label on it, and then that's when it becomes an Islay whiskey. And here we are doing everything from seed to bottle, which is stupid expensive, to grow on Islay, to mature on Islay, to bottle on Islay. We're on a rock in the middle of the Atlantic. We have to ship over empty bottles. Everything has to go on and off on these ferries. It's not like we're just on the mainland. It's expensive to do. It's really hard to do what we're doing on Islay, but we're doing it because we believe in giving back to the island that's given so much to the world when it comes to whiskey. So we've said it publicly: if we can't mature on Islay, we'll stop making whiskey. If we can't grow on Islay, we'll stop making whiskey. If we can't do it all on Islay, well, we just won't do it.
I got a couple of things for you. The first one, I did like how specific you were about a 16-year-old whiskey, not to call anyone out in particular. Not that anyone makes a very famous 16-year-old Islay.
We do have relationships with them, considering who our old master distiller was and where he came from. So And I have friends that work for this unnamed company, and we take jabs at each other every now and again, so I think it's fine.
All right. The other one I have is probably a question that will be interesting to literally no one but me, but since you're here, I'm going to ask. You did talk a little bit about, sometimes you guys are always experimenting and trying different things, and sometimes projects get abandoned. But you made me think of something I actually had forgotten. That when I was on Islay in '08, I got to try out of barrel a prototype whiskey that I believe was going to be called Loch-in-Dal, and it was supposed to sit right between Bruichladdich and Port Charlotte.
Yeah.
I've got to assume that that's a dead project. It's not going to launch as a 25-year or something.
Well, a lot of things that we thought died at Bruichladdich, which Bruichladdich did a couple of times, came back to life. It's not something that we are actively putting a lot of effort into now, but then again, neither was Port Charlotte. And we still, even the fact that we have those warehouses in Port Charlotte that you were talking about visiting, they're absolutely gorgeous, but they're going to fall down. We do own the Port Charlotte warehouses, which there was a distillery there. There was a distillery on Octomore Farm. Like there were other distilleries. There were tons of distilleries on Islay. We still have some tricks up our sleeve on what we're doing. But again, we all remember Bruichladdich from 12, 15 years ago when you went into any store and there were 95 different Bruichladdich. You just look around confused about what they were doing. And
the good days.
Yeah, well, people miss them, but we also it's tough to keep up with that because then you have these things. How do we get this? How can I get this? We only did 900 bottles of it. We only did 200 bottles of this, 250 bottles of this. So we've taken everything and kind of brought it to a core range, and now it's just based off of places and Loch-in-Dal. So that works with our theme because we have Bruichladdich from the town of Bruichladdich. Obviously, we have Port Charlotte from the town of Bruichladdich, or from town of Port Charlotte. Then we have Octomore, which is the farm directly in between the town of Port Charlotte and the town of Bruichladdich. So 3 places come together pretty well. Loch-in-Dal being the bay out front fits in there pretty nice. But we have no immediate plans to release a Loch-in-Dal whiskey.
Have you had it out of barrel when you were there?
Yeah, but
there's not much of it.
No, and the thing is, there's stuff at that in those warehouses, in the Vatican warehouse we call the big one. You've been there, that exists, that is stupid. And it'll never come out.
Yeah.
I'm not saying stupid as in bad.
Oh,
I mean,
come on. You guys released X4. Nothing could be dumber than X4.
Yeah, X4 was pretty dumb. I've got some. Well, I've got the Octomore. Well, Octomore X4 though too.
Yes,
that's pretty dumb.
Yeah.
I have some right here in my cabinet next to me. But we have some whiskeys in there that are 50 years old, something like that. But they're not good. They're old. It's wood, it's water, it's lost all of its ABV. There's no alcohol there. There's no flavor. It's just died in the wood, and it exists, but it's just there for us as a teaching tool. It's there for us to play with and talk about and just kind of guide people with. We're not going to do anything with it, but we have a lot of weird things that maybe not all of them work out, but we do have over 250 different styles of casks in the warehouse, right? So it's not like we're just doing things in ex-bourbon and French wine. We have things from all over the place, and it's fun to see what we're bringing in. It's fun to see what's kind of coming out, and yeah, it's exciting to see where we're going to go next, but it'll be a while until we release an actual core range product again.
All right. Now, these are, in theory, supposed to be a 1-hour tasting, and we are absolutely going to run long, but we should at least make an attempt to get back on track a little bit.
Yeah, let's go a little quicker here.
Let's go on to the organic. Now, I absolutely am happy to ramble on about completely mad esoterica at the end of the event. For those at home who maybe have things they have to do, let's try to get through at least the core thing at least a little quicker. Not that I'm not having fun at all.
I tend to go on. This is the thing, is normally I do these things in person, and it's on a stage in front of people, and there's a clock and somebody a team looking at you being you've got this much time and holding things up, and it's just I could just talk about it for days because that's my job. So it's I just go on and ramble and rant, but I'm doing it again. So the organic again is just another kind of look into the barley itself, and that's where we want to go with that. So taking that from your Islay barley and then going to organic, which is Scottish mainland grown organic barley, and if you just want to give it a try, it'll just give you a different sort of outlook on the overall sort of idea that barley makes a huge difference in your whiskey.
I think the peak shines through on the organic far more than either the classic or the Islay barley. Now, of course, the barley is unpeated, but of course I've seen where the water comes from. It comes from underneath the bloody peat bog. So
Yeah.
I've heard that the water in the little stream next to the still runs, what, about 5 to 6 kind of ppm phenol? Is that about accurate?
Yeah, it does, but we don't really do anything with it. Like we filter out like rocks and sediment, but it's just pure spring water from below Octomore Farm.
Yeah.
So yeah, you'll get a little residual sort of idea. It's like if you took a peat brick and you kind of just like waved it over the glass or the shadow touched it, then you might get that little bit of it, but it's
I get
virtually
quite a bit,
and chemically non-existent.
And yes, this is the 2009, Jeremy. This is the organic barley.
So that's the one that I have. That is the same with you guys here, the 2009 organic. But again, 50%. It kind of has that little bit of like, maybe it's a little bit of a placebo thing that when people drink organic whiskeys or organic beers, they kind of get like a little funk to it. It's like when you're drinking a biodynamic wine or something like that. But in wine, it's a lot more prevalent because you're going to get a lot of those flavors for those kind of volatile chemicals inside of the actual bottle itself. When whiskey, it's a distilled product, so you're not going to get a lot of that. But I still, just because that's the way I was introduced to organic beverages and foods, like that, I still get that little kind of, there's a little something there that's a little unique, I guess. And I'm not one to sit and generally give out tasting notes to people. Like I don't like to sit there and say, I get caramel. Well, yeah, I taste like oak. Well, it's been in a cask for a while. I don't want to say like all these sort of biased your palate or biased your opinion on things by giving you flavor profiles.
Everything under the sun tastes like lemon and apple.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, notes, but I can give you really weird ones. Like it's like, oh, it tastes like or smells like the gorse flower on like a mid-August day. You know, that could be anything. Like that's coconut. That's what coconut. It smells like coconut for these that don't know. But I could say something really pretentious like that, and people will sit there and go, yeah, I get that. Like that's got to be a thing. But our whole thing is just make it as streamlined as possible. I love to hear what people taste. There's no wrong answers in it. But it's sort of like, it's a very personal thing. Everything tastes different to other people, right? So some people like cilantro, some people don't. Some people like Bruichladdich, most should.
Being very honest, I've never liked Octomore. I've had Octomore out of cask at the distillery. I've had virtually every expression that's come to North America. I've had it right out of the still. I've never liked Octomore. I adore Port Charlotte. Port Charlotte's probably one of my 3 favorite whiskeys on earth. I adored the Lockendal actually above all of them because it tasted like better Bunnahabhain, but we won't go there. But no,
Did you have the 10.4?
I've not had the 10.4.
The 10.4 is an absolute, excuse my French here, mind fuck of a whiskey. It makes 0 sense whatsoever. On paper, it doesn't make any sense. Like, why would this exist? It's 3 years old. It's 64% alcohol. It's done in virgin oak. And it's the most absurd, beautiful, well-rounded, rich like whiskey I've had in a long time, and it's 3 years old. It's super heavily peated. I think it's like 88 parts per million, which is low for an Octomore, but it is it's unbelievable. When the 6.3 came out, people were blown away by the 6.3, and they absolutely love that. And I get it because it's an Islay Barley. It's grown on Octomore Farm. It's the Octomore of Octomore. It was finished in Chateau Yquem casks, so it's like very unique and very special and very beautiful. It was the highest ppm one we ever did at like 256 parts per million, and people fell in love with that. That became a cult whiskey. And then people kind of drank the Octomores, and they always compared it to that 6.3. That was always the one that was like the best. And then this 10.4 came out, and it's a Scottish mainland, and it's virgin oak, and it's 3 years old, and it's there. It rivals it. It's just like it should sit next to on this like altar.
I don't know if I'm picking an Octomore, it'd have to be the Orpheus. I really liked the Orpheus.
Orpheus is great too, yeah. And that's one of those ones that like if you have it, people are gonna want to fight you for it.
I'm sitting here just staring at a blacker, redder, and golder tin just hanging out here, and tragically they're empty.
Empty? Well, next time I come out there, I'll bring some redder still with me. My golder's gone and my blacker's gone, but I still have 2 bottles of redder still.
Are we gonna see you out here at some point then?
I think soon, sometime soon as I'm allowed to travel again, but I spend a lot of time out there for the most part when I'm traveling. It's out that direction. So I get, normally when things are back up and running on a regular year, I'd be out there probably 4 or 5 times a year. So the next time I'm allowed to, I'll reach out and I'll let you know, and we'll do something fun. Either we do like an in-person tasting or a dinner or something cool like
That
that.
sounds really fun because we have an amazing Bruichladdich rep here, and I have
Yeah.
a slight reputation of being difficult to get along with for agents. Is a bit of an understatement. I'm considered a bit of an absolutely monstrous human being, but I have an absolutely amazing relationship with the Bruichladdich rep here, at least. So he also used
Amazing.
to
Yeah,
work
it's good to.
here. So what's that?
Pardon me? Also used to work there?
Yeah, he worked here before he ended up working for Glazers. So
Amazing.
guy I liked well enough to hire. So
Yeah, we've got good people. But if you want to move on to the Bere Barley.
I do, because I already know it's going to be my favorite of them. I absolutely adore the Bere Barley expression.
Hands down, this is my favorite whiskey we make, and out of the weird things that we've done in the crazy French first growth Bordeaux casks and the 30-year-old, the cognac casks and the crazy wild waves, rocks, peats, all the things, the Bere Barley is my favorite whiskey ever. And I don't know, I can't remember what, I think you guys have the 2008, so that might be a 9-year-old, it should say on there.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is like no other whiskey in existence. This is Bere Barley. It's a different strain of barley. So what we've been drinking, everybody's been drinking for the past however many 80 years, I guess, plus, has been this 2-row barley. It's called 2-row because it grows on a stalk in 2 rows, right? That's the genius of the name 2-row. Very creative people naming these things.
High sugar, low protein versus 6-row. Yeah.
Exactly. High sugar is going to give you a high yield. So you're going to get a lot more liquid, a lot more bang for your buck kind of thing for it. So you're going to make more money.
Also, we actually have another rep watching, apparently. Corey, who is a liquor rep down here, said slight. Yes, Corey. I did actually follow that up and say I'm a bit of an awful, monstrous human being. I did say that. So,
That's amazing. Just getting called out. You're getting called out for dropping the water in your whiskey. I absolutely
deserve it.
I like it. See, if this was in person, there'd be a lot of booing going on. A chair would get thrown or something. It would have been a whole event, but now we're doing it on Skype. So hopefully soon.
See, the things we miss out on.
But yeah, this has become sort of a thing with whiskey is people buy it again, like I was talking about for the yield. But the 2-row is just, you have your different strains of 2-row barley. Yes, so you have like your concertos, your golden promise, your optics, all these different strains of 2-row, and they come and they go, because barley is susceptible to disease. So it's very much like phylloxera when it came over and destroyed all the grapes in the regions of France, things like that. It's the birth of brandy came from that pretty much. But it's barley comes and goes. So in 50 years, you might not see optic as the number 1 and number 2 kind of thing. I can share. It'll be a different new strain of barley that's been man-made and kind of man-created to be less susceptible to these diseases. And Bere Barley is this old ancient grain. It's an old like Viking barley. This thing is kind of weathered every storm. It's a hardy barley. It stands up to things. It's a really tall grass. It blows over and it kind of breaks really easily. But it grows from in kind of harsh conditions, and it has this really unique flavor that doesn't exist in any other whiskey out there, really, because it's a showcase of this barley in its purest form. And to me, it just tastes like if you cut open like a fresh, like sourdough bread or something, and it has this kind of weird, like musty, funky, bakery sort of thing. And again, I hate giving these like notes, but it's just the most unbelievable whiskey, and I'm absolutely obsessed with it.
I think one of my favorite smells on planet Earth is the smell of that cast iron mash tun when it's running, and it's like the greatest smell of oatmeal on planet Earth is that hot mashing in smell when that 200-year-old monster is,
that's it.
Thundering
it's
along
beautiful. It's
grain.
like the greatest sauna of all time being in there. It's gonna be the coldest, wettest day outside on Islay, and then you get into that mash room, and it's like a warm hug. All the air is just vapors of barley, and it's beautiful. It's a great smell, and that's basically like the smell of Bere Barley. Like it's a thing. It's kind of like, it's comforting. It's when we first made it, we didn't know how it was going to work because we didn't understand how, like, the properties of the barley itself. We didn't understand like how much sugar and starches were in it, sort of thing. So we dumped it all into our mash tun. We did our 7 tons of barley to 25,000 liters of hot water, the same recipe we used for everything else, and it gummed up the Victorian mash tun and broke a couple of those teeth off that are used to stir it up. And and we couldn't make whiskey because our mash tun was broken, and that was an issue because we were a broke distillery and we didn't have a lot of money. So we closed down for like 4.5, 5 months, and we made gin because we had to make money. So we created the botanist gin out of necessity. But because the Bere Barley kind of flipped us off, gave us the middle finger, and wanted to be a pain in the ass to work with. But when we finally got it under control, it made an absolutely beautiful, beautiful, beautiful whiskey. And it's one that I always take with me no matter where I go, no matter what kind of tasting I'm doing, no matter where I am in the world. I'll always find a bottle of Bere Barley. Either I have to get it here from my collection, which I hate taking from because I want to drink it, or I'll have it shipped out from somewhere and I'll take it because I need people to taste it because it doesn't exist. This is what single malt whiskey would have tasted like 200 years ago. Like, this is a whiskey that's being made in a distillery from the 1800s in an old Victorian mash tun, like with this old bobby mill with an ancient grain that illegal distilleries were using before it was a thing. It was Bere Barley. This is what whiskey would have tasted like, and it's kind of like tasting the past. It's super cool.
I completely agree. Lots of folks asking, do we have any of the Bere Barley? And I was about to say really confidently, yes, we do. And then I looked over at the shelf and no, we don't. I just must have sold out in the last couple, 3 days. Hopefully there is some in stock in Alberta. Brad will get on answering that question because he's our local rep. He'll let me know via the comments. Damn well better.
You'll be able to find some. You guys have everything out there. It's the wild, wild west. Yeah, I'm jealous of the stock you guys have. So.
Well, I mean, Alberta has been like a single malt hotbed for about as long as I've been doing this, which is, it's going to be, good Lord, I am really close. I am 17 days from my 20th anniversary of being in the liquor industry.
Yeah. You guys are the most passionate whiskey drinkers in the country for sure. And it's, whenever I go to Alberta, I always travel with like an extra suitcase because I'll always bring back whiskeys and things that I can't find anywhere else. Like, I'm based in Ontario, I'm in Toronto, and we don't have anything because it's all government run stores. Yeah. And so like the big mob LCBO limits us to the classic Laddie, and like that's it. So luckily I work for the distillery, so if I want something, I just ask them and they give it to me. But I like to find unique things that don't exist anymore. And a lot of the fun stuff that I've found have been in little independent stores and stuff like that in Alberta, and I absolutely love it. It's always fun to see what we can come across.
Well, it's been too long since we've had a real like big Bruichladdich event. I mean, Brad's done a couple for us, but like, you know, the last big like ticket sold one we had was Jim McEwen, I think, was the last one we had, and then we had 3 or 4 with Andrew Gray before that, and that's taking us back to like 2004-ish. So it's been a while.
Yeah, well, you're long overdue for them, and I'll be out there as soon as I can because I miss being out there, and I'll bring along some friends with me too. I think I'm going to get Adam over this year. I had Lynn McEwen over last year. Not too many months ago, actually. I guess the beginning of the year, Lynn was over with me in Alberta, and we did like a couple little fun things. So we'll be sure to set some cool stuff up, and I'll bring some special bottles out there too.
Excited for it, and I know everybody else is excited too. Let's jump merrily right along and get on to just about
Port Charlotte
Islay Barley out there. Port Charlotte.
Yeah, so I unfortunately, because we were talking before, I don't get everything you guys get. So I don't have the Islay Barley Port Charlotte, but I do have the Port Charlotte MRC. So that's just the one that was in my cabinet.
Poor lamb, yes.
Yeah. I unfortunately I have to drink this beautiful, you know, Port Charlotte that's been matured in a first growth Bordeaux cask. So Port Charlotte, for those of you, I would normally do raise your hand if you don't like peated whiskey, and
I don't
one
need
or
to
two
see
people
any
would.
hands here. I mean,
exactly. Normally,
I'm looking
hope
through the comments, and I
two.
think Craig has literally been at the Jim McEwen event at least 3 out of the 4 Andrew Grays, if not 4 out of the 4, and then every event that Brad Sharp's done for us. So yeah, we have a bit of
committed. Yeah.
Well, again, I mean, now I own the store, but I got brought in. Well, I originally got brought in to drive the delivery truck because I was 18 and stupid. But you know, when I actually moved into the store, I basically took over the whiskey department because literally no one wanted it. And then I started working with, in the very early days, Lee Hansen with Freehouse, who was selling all the Murray McDavid and Bruichladdich and everything. And I think I was 22 or 23 the first time I actually got to have like a whiskey made for me to my palate by Murray McDavid, which now being, you know, almost 40, it's like, that's insanity. What the hell was I doing? But I did manage to pull that out. And I still have one sealed bottle of the Alto Vene that we did with Mary McDavid, the very first one. I don't have any of the Kleinlich, which was my favorite. I don't have any of the Lefroy. I don't have any of the Mortlach. That's all sold. But I do still have one bottle of Alto Vene still unopened.
I struggle with keeping bottles closed. I can't keep them closed. I just want people to drink them, and it's a problem where it's like I have a lot of whiskey here, but I don't drink a lot of it at home. But if I have people over, the first thing we're doing is like, you guys got to try some cool stuff we have. Like, what do you want to drink? And I don't think there's a single sealed bottle in my house. It just is all open. It's a free for all. It's here to be drank, and I'm a big believer in drinking it. But the Port Charlotte you guys have in front of you, so that is kind of our amalgamation of where Port Charlotte has gone over the past few years, because it has gone all over the place. It's gone a little bit more peated. It's gone a little bit less. It had different age statements to it. We did a lot of cast stuff to it. This Port Charlotte's my favorite one you have, because you have the Islay Barley Port Charlotte, correct?
We do have the, what do we have right now? We have Port Charlotte Scottish Barley, and we have, yes, the Islay Barley. The packaging being so easy to read from a distance with your black on dark gray.
Yeah, we're a distillery guised in secrets, and we're not. We're very open about what we do. But yeah, Port Charlotte Islay Barley is special because obviously Port Charlotte is on Islay. Port Charlotte, obviously known as the home of the Port Charlotte Hotel and this little tiny bar called The Ditch. If you've been there,
the Lockendall.
Exactly. But it's
I like the Lockendall. You know what? The only time I ever managed to taste Ardbeg Lord of the Isles was at the Lockendall, and it was under the counter. It was only because I was playing pool
on that slanted pool table.
On the super slanted pool table with a couple of the barrel rollers from the Bruichladdich distillery that I just ran into at the Port Charlotte. And they're like, now, why are you buying beers here? It's way cheaper across the street. Let's just go there. Yeah. So we went there, and I said, well, what haven't you had when you're here? It's like, well, I really wanted to have, going to have an old acquaintance, which I did find, and I billed to the store to the tune, I think, of 125 pounds for an ounce and a half. So business expense. But I also wanted to try Lord of the Isles, and they did have one. And the only reason I actually got to try it was the fact that I was there with a couple of the lads from Bruichladdich. So, yeah,
it's a tough place to leave. It's once you're inside Lockendall, it's tough to leave because it's a nice place to be.
It is. It's the Islay dive bar, and I love it so much.
Great seafood tower, though.
I would not eat seafood at the Lockendall for anything
honestly,
in this universe.
It's honestly really good.
At the Lockendall. I wouldn't trust a pickled egg.
It's honestly a really good seafood tower. It's like the hot spot that's the thing. You go to Lockendall, the ditch, as we call it, and you eat the seafood tower. It's really good. The only problem is we're Canadian. We have access to really, really, really nice oysters in Canada. And I'm sorry if anybody is Scottish or that, but Scottish oysters are awful. They're like Gulf oysters. They're the size of this cell phone. They're terrible. So we would always go to like
the reason that I stopped eating live oysters for the better part of like 15 years.
Because of
I
Scottish
still
oysters?
won't eat them. Was on Islay at the Harbour Inn, dinner with Andrew Gray, and I got an oyster with a live like parasite worm thing under the oyster. After I sucked out the oyster, the shell had this wriggling nightmare in it.
Perfect.
I've not touched an oyster since.
We always pour Octomore on it. So we pour Octomore and Port Charlotte on the oysters when we're over there. It's the only way I'll eat Scottish oysters if they're drowning in Port Charlotte. But Port Charlotte, the whiskey, is named after this beautiful little town, home of these beautiful, amazing things and these hilarious nights that you'll have not eating oysters, but drinking whiskey and beer in the Lockendall. But this is sort of like our expression that's, here's a standard Islay whiskey. This is what the personification of Islay for the most part. This is Islay. If you took the whole island and threw in a bottle, this is it. This is the heart of Islay that is made by Elax. It's made from water from Islay. It's made from barley from Islay. It's mash milled, fermented, distilled on Islay. Everything is done with the island in mind. And this is the absolute quintessential Islay whiskey. This is as traditionally Islay as you could possibly get. It's high proof, so I think that one should be 50 ABV as well. But it's a beautiful, gorgeous, phenomenal whiskey. And this is, if anybody wants to claim to be the whiskey of Islay, it should be the Port Charlotte Islay Barley, 100%.
And I've heard, for the 15th year in a row that you guys are breaking ground on the brand new Port Charlotte distillery next year.
Yeah, we'll keep telling people that, and then one day it'll just happen, and then people go over there for fees and the festival, and then all of a sudden it'll be at Portia. Like we'll just put it up in a day, and it'll just exist. But it's it keeps getting pushed back because again, it's like one of those things. Like
It's
we
a
do own
ludicrous amount of money.
it's a stupid amount of money, but we luckily we have mom and dad's money now, being owned by Remy Cointreau. So if we need money, we just beg to our French parents, and hopefully they'll help us out. But it's right now we're kind of straightforward ahead with our malting floors, and we're building those warehouses too. So we built, I think we've got 3 up now, just up the hill from the distillery, 3 new warehouses, and we have a plan to build 7 more next to that. Also the malting floors. Also, we have a barley provenance program happening right next to the distillery. So before we were doing this, we were outsourcing to farmers, right? So we bring in a farmer and we go, listen, can you do us a favor and just grow us a bunch of this weird barley that we don't know if it's going to work or not, and we don't know like what's going to happen. Like it might die, it might not even make it through the season, and we've got to bring on a farmer that's going to risk his livelihood to be like, yeah, let's do something fun and quirky and weird because these crazy people at this distillery want me to try it. So finally, we've kind of let them do their thing, and they grow barley for us, and everything is set, and it works. It's great. We've had 19 farmers on Islay, about 18 on mainland Scotland that grow barley, but only for us, and we have a great working relationship with them. And now currently we have a plot of land just next to the distillery that we've been planting. I personally helped plant probably about 150 rows of experimental barley next to the distillery that we're growing, so we can try different styles, different flavors, different promise, different everything, like all these crazy weird barleys that don't exist anywhere else. And we're growing them all in about 4-foot by 8-foot plots. And there's probably about 250 different styles right now growing next to the distillery, which is really fun. So we're gonna start making whiskey out of them and see what happens.
That's amazing. That's just, again, like in winemaking terms, that's like the nursery plot, like the let's just see what grows in this dirt. Let's see what happens. The idea of a distillery with its own nursery plot is A, madness, but B, incredible.
That's the thing is like when we took our approach to making whiskey from winemaking. When we were reopened again, right, by Mark Grenier and Simon Coughlin, those guys were wine professionals. They lived wine, and wine is one of the greatest things in the world. I'm absolutely obsessed with it, and it's the subtle nuances in the production of wine that make it so special. Everything from the weather, the biodynamics of it, anything is so minuscule and so microscopic to make such a huge difference in the flavor profile from one year to another. And it's when you're going to notice on those 3 you have, it doesn't have age statements on it, big letters. It has the vintage on it, 2010, 2009, 2008. That's the vintage. That's the year it was grown. That's the year the barley was grown. So we're putting this sort of ethos and thought process into the whiskey world that we're taking and adapting from the winemaking world, because that's the way it should be. Everything should be done for a reason. It shouldn't just be done for the money at the end and how much money you're going to make. Every little thing you do should have a rhyme or a reason for it. And to create better tasting whiskey or uniquer tasting whiskey is 100% the reason we do it. So we have to take those cues from the winemaking world and try to steer our industry towards that. And we're noticing it more and more as distilleries open up, not just in Scotland, but in the States, in Canada, Westland out of Seattle. They're doing the same thing. Uber Provenance, everything kind of grown there. All the wood for their barrels grown locally. Like everything is, people are starting to take notice on what's happening in such a traditional industry like single malt whiskey. And it's changing, which is the weirdest thing in the world, to take something so set in stone and so kind of just like stagnant over hundreds of years. And now there's just this sort of 90-degree turn into what if we do this? And it's really exciting to be here when it's starting, because we're going to get to see it. We're all whiskey fans, and we're going to get to see the direction that whiskey changes. And then when we're all old and gray and we're talking about these whiskeys, we can tell the story of the good old days or the shitty old days when whiskey was all just the same and nobody took care of it. It just kind of existed.
Is it starting, or has it always been there with Bruichladdich, at least post 2000? I mean, 46 now is becoming closer to an industry standard. Additional cask enhancements, like Glenmorangie now is like they're repeating every year. Like, here's our weird, crazy Bruichladdich style thing that we're doing.
Exactly. Well, we still like to say it's starting. I know we don't like to give ourselves like a big pat on the back, but we do know that we were a big influence in what's happening in the direction of the whiskey industry, and especially with the knowledge of whiskey consumers. And it's when Bruichladdich was bought by Remy Cointreau, their only thing Bruichladdich, yeah, and people were terrified. They thought, oh, this big French company is going to come and ruin this little independent distillery.
Well, we stopped getting our 31 off releases a year. Damn it.
Yeah, I know, but now we can survive.
Yeah, okay, but
now we can keep making whiskey.
That.
If we kept doing that, we'd only last another year or two. But
that feels like a you problem.
Yeah, I know. But we have these like this parent money of coming from Remy Cointreau that believe in the same thing. When you look at the cognac that Remy Martin makes, it's the same ethos, it's the same thought process. It's coming from a wine, basically, so it's the same thing. And basically, when Bruichladdich was bought by Remy Cointreau, they had all these marketing dollars they wanted to give them. Like, what do you want to do? Like, we're going to do commercials. We're going to do this. What do you want to do? And Bruichladdich, Simon was just like, no, we're hiring people to educate. And so they took all the marketing dollars and they hired people like me and Ewald and Abby, who's in whoever, and Caitlin, who's in South Africa. And they brought us on instead. And they said, you'll never see a TV ad for Bruichladdich. You'll never see a magazine ad for Bruichladdich. You'll never see a bus poster, whatever, for Bruichladdich. We don't do advertisement because we don't believe in it. We think people should hear about us the way it organically is going to come about, by becoming educated and learning more about it. And I love going to whiskey shows and hearing people, because I hear people come over to me and they go, "You see that whiskey over there? How much food coloring it has in it?" And they start shit talking somebody, and I go, these are my people. Like, people are getting it. And it's so exciting to see like the uproar in like whiskey consumers are becoming like these really knowledgeable people that care so much about the pH level of your soil and not just the big number on the front of the bottle, right? I like to think we had a big hand in that, and I'm really excited to see. We want every distillery to do this.
Yes.
We want everybody to do it. We don't want to just be the only people that are unique for doing this stuff. Like, we love Compass Fox because they're saying fuck you to the norms, and like, we love all these things. We wish every distillery would start being a little more unapologetic and just started going their own way a little bit and just put some exciting stuff out that we as whiskey consumers are going to love.
Andrew Symington, because have you ever met the man? God, what a dick. I mean, nobody loves that guy, but you love what he's doing.
Yeah, love the thought process.
Yeah, the guy himself, though. God, what a dick. I'm a dick. And
same thing can be said about me, too. So
yeah, well, you know, it attracts a certain kind, this whiskey business of ours.
Although I'm unapologetically a dick, so.
Here's to that. So, Reed is an amazing guest. Obviously, he knows vastly more than literally every like national brand ambassador I have ever met in the 20 years I've been doing this, and he cares vastly more than any national brand ambassador I've ever met in doing this. You folks should ask some questions, like right now, because, and I realize that I'm not going to get questions right now because we're on a 30-second delay, but yeah, this is someone you should be asking questions to, because this is someone I'm learning from.
I tell my company this all the time too, and like I wouldn't work anywhere else. These are my people. Bruichladdich is like what I do. Like, this is it. And yes, I work for Remy Cointreau now. I started out as just Bruichladdich. I was hired by Simon. Like, he's the one that hired me for this role. And then it kind of morphed into Remy Cointreau, because what I do is talk to people. And I think I'm pretty good at talking to people. So it kind of morphed into this umbrella role. But I tell people, parents don't publicly have a favorite child. Like, I'm the middle child. I know I'm not the favorite child. But Bruichladdich is 100% my favorite of everything we do. I am obsessed with Bruichladdich. If I could do anything for the rest of my life, it would be working for Bruichladdich. So before I started working with this company, I was offered jobs by like 6 other companies to be a brand ambassador for them. I said no, because I didn't believe in what they did or their ethos or their brand. I didn't want to be a part of. I didn't want to put my face next to something that I didn't 100% wholeheartedly agree with. And it's the best decision of my life, and I'm not going anywhere. I talked to Lynn the other day, and she's told her she's stuck with me for at least another 25, 30 years.
I have noticed a bit of a pattern. Whenever you talk about, Remy Cointreau, it's I and they, and anytime you talk about Bruichladdich, it's...
You know what? That's true, but it's not that people at Remy Cointreau have treated me terribly, because every time I go to France, I get treated like family. But it's at Bruichladdich, these are people that I just text and call all the time. Like I talk to Lynn McEwen and Adam Hannett all the time. Every week I talk to somebody, and it's just shooting the shit. It's not just work related emails. It's just, hey, how's it going? What's going on? Just like randomly shit talking each other. It's just a thing. Like they're like my family. They're the best people in the world, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
And I think that's an interesting thing that a lot of people don't see is just how small the industry is. I mean, there's you and then me and then the distillery. It's a very small group of people, at least at the premium level, at least at the interesting level. Anybody can open a price discounter store and sell Bud Light for $1 above cost, and many people do. But
yeah, but it's a small world. We all know one another, and it's like it's not just like ambassadors know one another. Like I see the same people across the country, across the world all the time. I'll run into somebody I know from Japan, somewhere in Germany, and I'll just be like, it's just a small whiskey world. It's just we all sort of exist. It's a very niche job. It doesn't really. There's not a ton of us that do it, and it makes it very, very exciting because you always get to see those same people too. It's the same people with their own stores or do shows or stuff like that. It's like the same consumers that come out every year, and you see the same people. It's like having mini reunions every time these things happen, and it's the best.
I got some questions from the crowd now. Michelle Griffiths asks, how does one become a brand ambassador? And then I'll staple onto that. What was your background before you became a brand ambassador?
Yeah, so how does one become one? I didn't really. I guess it stems from the second question. So I worked in bars before in Toronto. So I worked in all sorts of bars. I worked as a busboy at one point when I was first out of school. I went to school for photography, which led me to end up working in the arts, and I worked in fine arts, and then which obviously leads to working in a restaurant because when you go to art school, you end up working as a busboy at a sports bar in downtown Toronto because being a fine artist doesn't pay the bills in whatever year it was. But it stemmed from working in restaurants, working in bars, becoming very passionate about wine and spirits and beer, making cocktails, and then sort of consulting for different restaurants and groups around Toronto, across the country, with either their marketing or design or their sort of like their direction for their bar, curating lists and things like that. And I was actually approached by someone from Remy Cointreau who just acquired like the whole sort of group in, I guess, 2012. They approached me and said, hey, do you want to interview for this role with Bruichladdich? And I said yes immediately. I turned down all these other jobs from other people, but I said yes to Bruichladdich because I knew Bruichladdich. I sold Bruichladdich all the time. I drank Bruichladdich all the time. I loved the botanist gin. It was just this thing that I loved, and it just sort of fell into my lap, I guess, which is weird. But yeah, I come from an arts background. I worked in bars as a bartender and consultant, and just was always sort of like every bar I worked in or ran, we considered ourselves educators, I guess. We had 25 different types of vermouth that we would talk about. So if somebody wanted to come in and get really nerdy with us about martinis, we could steer them in certain directions of where they want their vermouth to come from or what styles of gin people wanted, from wine to anything. I love the nerdy aspect of all things spirits and beer and stuff like that. So I would educate myself. So when people came in, I could have a general conversation with anybody across any walk, depending on what they like to drink. So I impressed the right people that worked for certain companies, and they sort of came to me, and now they're stuck.
So Michelle, I'll answer the question much shorter. Be wildly overqualified and too good at what you do in either the repping, retail, or restaurant side. Be the top 1% of what you do, like nationally, or at least in your area, and you may become a national brand ambassador. That's usually where you get headhunted.
Yeah, it's tough too because it's the fun role, and I hate being like, it's the fun role, but we owe everything to everybody else that does all the actual work. Like all the sales reps that do everything when we come out. When I come out to Alberta for a visit, and everything's getting put together, from tastings to events to drives to anything you can think of is thought out by somebody else. They keep us on this tight schedule to go and talk and do things and do great things, and I just get to reap the benefits by talking and drinking and eating and stuff like that. But it's also just filling your head full of all sorts of knowledge you could possibly think. Like I don't just research my own brands by talking to the people that make it. Like I talk to the people that make our competing brands, to all categories across all portfolios. It's like I'll sit here and talk about cachaça as much as I possibly can, but I have a bottle in my cabinet because I can't find it anywhere. It's not like I
Oh
just
no,
try and become as
that's me and
educated as I
grappa.
possibly
Like,
can.
you want to turn this
Yeah,
into a
exactly.
grappa tasting right now? Oh yes,
Yeah,
let's make this a
anything you
grappa
want,
night.
any spirit, I'll go on a rant about forever just because I've done so much research because I'm passionate about it. And Bruichladdich made me extra passionate about it too. Like I thought I was when I first started in 2012 and or whatever 2015, and they've just completely turned me into an absolute monster, and now I'm obsessed.
And if anyone just asked, oh, did Kyle just switch to grappa in the middle of this Scotch event in front of the national brand ambassador? Yes, I did,
That's
because
okay.
he gave me the opening. And actually, I do have a reason for switching this other than the fact I really, really like grappa. This is a post-Bruichladdich grappa. This is a grappa that owes everything to Jim McEwen because this is a grappa aged in Madeira cask and advertising itself as being aged in Madeira cask. Before Bruichladdich and the Jim McEwen era, that would never exist in a trillion years. This is a product that owes everything to Jim McEwen being a human being and working at Bruichladdich. This is impossible without that. So
I've said it before. They should, if they're going to build a statue on Islay or in the whiskey world about anybody, there's already a bar named after him. There should be.
Is there
like
really? That's kind of
yeah. I
fun.
think it's in like there's a bar in Singapore named after him, and we have the Laddie bar in Japan, which is a full like beautiful bar and restaurant. But it's called the Laddie bar, and they have these really funky bottles of Bruichladdich that we've
and
done.
Everything's in bloody teal.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff is in teal, but there should be a statue of Jim McEwen out there, just either with a glass up or like throwing a chair or something.
Also, I have a very specific and tiny axe to grind with you.
Yeah, go for it.
Bring back the old font. I liked the old font. The old font was great.
But now we own a font.
Yeah, I know that. I know the reasons.
It's like our bottles, right? Like
Aaron agrees with you, the new font is a better font. I liked the old font.
Yeah, I know, but this is our proprietary font now. Like this is us, and like same thing with the bottle. Like we've got our color, which is great, but the bottle, this classy Laddie bottle, will change pretty soon too. So we're working on that. Like you're gonna like, if you like this new Port Charlotte bottle, which we think is absolutely fantastic. We do have a new
absolute mint in international shipping. How much smaller it is. For everybody at home, that doesn't look like a huge difference. It's maybe 3/4 of an inch narrower and about 1/2 an inch, 3/4 of an inch shorter. In terms of international shipping over the course of a year to everywhere on Earth, the savings are going to be in the millions, if not the tens of millions, I would think. Like just
we don't make that much whiskey,
boxes.
but a good amount. Yeah, but we're changing the classic bottle very soon. So we have some that we've seen come through the pipeline. So we're looking at those now and trying to decide where we're going to go. Because when we first started making this, nobody was really using these little kind of like squat bottles, right? These like wide shouldered sort of like bottles for whiskey. But now they're everywhere.
Now it's half the bloody industry.
It's a very common bottle. You can find Amaros in this, tequilas are in these bottles, anything's in these bottles. And we like the fact that we had a proprietary bottle for Port Charlotte now, and the Botanist gin is a custom bottle. So we're working on getting the rest of the unpeated line, the Bruichladdich line, in something brand new as well, which will be really fun.
Well, let's talk about the Botanist gin, because when I was last there, Ugly Betty wasn't set up yet. It was still sitting on a pallet in the warehouse. Yeah. It was not set up at all. And lemon stills, at least on Islay, are not desperately common. Talk to us a little bit about the cheap and dirty side of Bruichladdich, the gin side.
Yeah, and so the gin kind of happened from necessity. Like I said, we broke our mash tun making Bere Barley, and we had this company come in, like, oh, we'll get you up and running in 3 weeks. We'll put a brand new stainless steel one in there. And we said, no, fuck you. We don't want stainless steel. We want cast iron because it's romantic and it's traditional, and we want that. So we were closed for a long time. And I don't know if you know this, but if you're not making whiskey at a whiskey distillery, you can't really make any money. So fortunately for us, but unfortunately for them, there was a distillery just kind of on mainland Scotland down there called Dunbarton Distillery, just kind of down the River Clyde, that was closing down. And so we kind of caught wind of this, and Duncan McGilvery, and who else was there? I guess Jim was obviously there, and Alan Logan. All three of those guys went over to that distillery. This was just before Remy Cointreau acquisition, and they bought basically everything. They bought 3 stills. So they bought 2 whiskey stills, big, beautiful swan-shaped whiskey stills. One of them now exists in a getting more well-known Irish whiskey distillery. And one of them sat on our front lawn for a while, and then we also bought a Le Mans still, which
I
we
remember
named
the one on
Ugly
the front
Betty.
lawn. Actually, I forgot about that until you brought it up. But I do remember
Yeah, that one
it
is
was the row of barrels spelling out the word Bruichladdich, and then the still right
in the
behind
big
it.
still in the
I
background.
remember
Yeah,
that.
so we got that from Dumbarton Distillery, and we got Ugly Betty as well, which is a Le Mans still, which I think only like 5 of these stills were made. It's a Frankenstein still, so it's
Oh, they're ugly as hell. Yeah.
hideous. It looks like an upside down like dustbin. It's most stills are beautiful and curved, and they're beautiful shapes. And Ugly Betty's just like this harsh shoulders, rivets, and nuts and bolts sticking out.
It looks
And
like
it's
somebody like stapled a 1980s Xerox photocopier to the top of like a classic 1800s copper still. They're ugly as anything.
and it's like it's just a combination of like a copper pot and like column still kind of thing. So like inside the neck, it has these sort of copper plates that you can adjust the angle to trick the liquid and the whatever to think it's getting more influence in the copper, right? It's all just like a ploy. It's to make whiskey think it's been in a still for a longer period of time, sort of thing. Get more in contact with the copper, and it works great. It's fantastic still. So, but it's ugly as all hell. So we painted a pinup girl on the side of it, called it Ugly Betty, and then handpicked a bunch of Islay grown botanicals with this couple called the Gullivers. It's this older couple who have retired now. They were botanicals that retired on the island. And Jim approached them, said, "Hey, can you find me some botanicals that grow wild on Islay? I want to make a gin." And we started making gin with botanicals that grow wild next to the island. And now the Gullivers have retired. We have a guy named James Donaldson, who is our new forager on the island. That's his sole job, is to forage for botanicals. And he goes out there all through the year and hand picks everything from Islay juniper to gorse that smells like coconut to different types of apple mint, spearmint, things like that. And we make a absolutely beautiful, beautiful gin on the island.
So now we've seen a lot of different random, wonderful, experimental things from Bruichladdich over the years. We've seen everything from the absolutely brilliant, like the never released Loch and Dall that I was lucky enough to try, to the ghoulish, but they released it anyway, X4, to the Renegade Rums, which came in Murray McDavid bottles for the first 3 releases, and then in these weird frosted bottles after that.
Yeah, these really weird, funky bottles. They had really aggressive shoulders on them.
Yeah, they had super hard shoulders. They were really neat, but they've always been at the bleeding edge. So what bleeding edge things are we going to see from Bruichladdich in the next little while that you're allowed to talk about?
Well, the rye, for one, which is really exciting. Like I said, it's rye hasn't been grown on the island in a long time. It doesn't stand up to the winds that exist on Islay and the weather that exists on Islay. There's sort of a very narrow growing season for rye specifically, and it's tough to grow in that part of the world. So we have grown rye, we have milled, mash fermented, we've distilled rye, and we laid to rest a bunch of rye in Bruichladdich barrels in the warehouse. So the rye will be the next kind of thing that comes out-ish. Like, will we? Maybe. Like, will we put it out? I don't know. People will try it. Like, I'll bring you some to drink, but will we sell it?
Yes.
I don't know. Is it just a thing that we're doing for fun? Maybe.
More or less,
yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
Who knows? We'll decide the day of kind of thing, and then it'll just exist or it won't exist, right? Like we're sort of flying by the seat of our pants here still after all these years, but the rye will be the next sort of thing. We did a few test things with the botanist, but it's not like the botanist is the botanist. It's its thing. It's beautiful. It's good. It's great. We put it in a old Bordeaux cask for 6 years, and it was unbelievable. It tasted like the perfect Martinez straight out of a barrel. It was one of the greatest things I've ever had in my life. And but yeah, for the most part, we're gonna focus on a lot of sort of micro province stuff, a lot of barley experimentation, a few more kind of like barrel experimentation things, and from that, it'll just be everything done at the distillery. Once we get our malting floors up and running, we're converting the old bottling hall line into the malting floors and shifting everything over one building.
Weren't those
basically
originally malting floors, like before it became a bottling line?
Yeah, but they weren't like in use in any real way. They just
Not
kind
since
of
what,
existed.
61 was the last floor malting at Bruichladdich?
Yeah, but it wasn't even like it was like a half floor. It was like a half-assed job of it, right? Like it didn't really exist. So we've been preparing for a long time. We've been talking about the malting floors for, well, as long as I've been there, but we've been drawing up plans for like physically where they're going to go for the past like 5 years. And then now we finally have a place and it's going, and they should be actually, maybe the next time I'm over there, they might be up and running. But yeah, so malted at Bruichladdich stuff, and then the rye will be a new fun thing. But yeah, we'll always come up with something unique and exciting. It just, we have to be inspired first.
I'm going to keep asking folks to contribute their favorites list because I always find it interesting, and it gives everyone a chance to contribute. Because if I see something completely insane, then I'm going to comment on it, and it'll be interesting. The other thing I did want to touch on, and I'll get to this in a sec, is the difference between floor maltings versus malted barley that you buy elsewhere, and how much that level of control kind of contributes. I did get to actually spend a day when I was on Islay at Bowmore, hanging out, seeing the floor maltings, chilling out in their giant, ridiculous, $100 million stupid, heat exchanger thing that heats the pool and all that. Yeah. But yeah, I don't really. Is there a huge difference between floor maltings and commercially prepared maltings?
There is, but it's. When you're talking commercially prepared maltings, it's all done in different kind of ways, but it's all the same idea in the end, right? So what we do with Bere's that does our maltings for us in Inverness is like they have these things called Saladin boxes, right? And they're it's like a big room, big floor, kind of like, I would say it's 20 feet by 65 feet, like a little hockey rink. And it's just filled maybe 2 feet tall with your barley, and then doors close, and basically like steam is pumped in and things start to grow, and then rakes come through and they keep turning it. Everything just keeps getting turned as the sugars start to convert. And that's it's the same idea as doing a floor malting. And then when you go somewhere that's super sort of new school, now they do it all in like a drum. So they have these big commercial drum maltings, which is like, it looks like a big tanker, and everything kind of goes in there. And they don't even use dried dug up peat anymore. They use peat pellets. They look like little rabbit turds almost, and they dump those in, which
like the hot
smoke
pellets you get with brewing.
Yeah, exactly. So they use peat pellets and things like that, and it gets the same process done. It's just different controls, right? So places like Bowmore and things like that that have their malting floors, have been doing for such a long time. Everything's down to an absolute science. Everything is like everything they do is perfect every time, how they want it. And because ours is coming through a separate company, and they have other companies obviously that will malt for them. So we'll send them the barley that we grow, and then we'll say we want it at this level, and then they'll send it back to us done. So they're not just sending out 40 ppm barley, right? Like they're sending out things to most places that are 40 ppm or 0 ppm, and then they're sending us the 258, the 301 ppm, the 88 ppms, all these weird things that we want, and we'll kind of decide where we go from there. But it's just about having a level of control. And I don't know what we're going to do when we get our own malting floors when it comes to specific things. I think for the most part, we're gonna malt all of our Islay barley at the distillery. And then we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do with the Octomore, because I'm not sure if we're going to be set up in the same way as Bere's to create the Octomore with our own malting floors. There's going to be some sort of an overlap where we're doing maltings from the two places to make specific SKUs, just because
nobody
we might not have the ability.
Needs a malting floor capable of 240 parts per million phenol. No.
Yeah,
no
why
one
would
needs
you, right?
that.
Like nobody. It's like, yeah, you don't need a car that has like 600 horsepower. You don't need it, but it's nice to have, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think we are gonna just about wrap it up there. I love it. Thank you for bearing with us. Hey, Reed, thank you. This was I told you an hour. It's been 90 minutes and counting. So thank you very much for sticking with us as long.
I'm sorry, you guys, if people that are still there that stuck through it. I'm sorry you guys had to listen to that for that long of a time. I need a big clock or somebody yelling at me to say hurry up or stop yapping about things.
We are all about the rambles. We got through the absolutely necessary stuff within an hour. We finished it minute 15. And then everything else has been kind of extra bonus content.
Love it. So when I come over there in person, we'll do like a big 4-hour thing, and we'll do like a big Royal Rumble of like whiskeys.
We'll
It'll be great.
Tasting hammocks. So if people need to take a nap halfway through, they can. For those who asked, I did actually have Mike grab out of the office our very last bottle, bottle 7 of 168 of our very first Murray David Altavene, the 1992 bottled in 2007 at Bruichladdich at 15 years old. And because I've been doing this far too long, I can remember selling this for the princely sum of like $64.95, and people being like, "That's so expensive. I don't know why you do these one-off bottlings." And it's like a 15-year at $100 is just like daily. It's madness.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was our very first. Again, along with my personal Academy bonding, I don't think this will ever actually get opened, but I'm glad I own it. I'm glad it's here. And it's signed by Jim McEwen on the side. That happened years and years later. I think Jim was here in 2016 or 2017 and signed it for us. But yeah, it's one of those things I'll never open.
Amazing. So, yeah. Hold on to it.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm gonna read. Will you hang up for 2 minutes so you and I can kind of debrief after we wrap up the formal
Yeah, no
tasting?
worries.
Rad. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. This was way too much fun. I really hope. I know that this is different. I know that everybody's used to coming in and hanging out and like well, I say we. I'm not at a cent on these things, but you know, Southern Glazers or Diageo or our good friend Andy Dunn at Gold Medal Marketing, they're the ones who pay for the whiskey, and you can come in and you can drink 6 whiskeys every Friday night completely on the house. I realize this year isn't like that. I hope that in some way I'm making up for it by providing really great guests like Reed that can provide a level of content that I sure as heck can. So I really want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for coming out and supporting these that we're doing, because it's weird times. But I'm having so much more fun doing them. I really hope you are. We are not celebrating, Mike, by opening that bottle of Alta Bene. Nice try. But yes, so on that, I'm Kyle with Andrew Hilton. Thank you all so much for watching. This was a ton of fun. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you again to Reddit. We will see you all again in Wednesday night for beer tasting, Friday night for a Sicilian tasting, and in 2 weeks for our next upcoming Scotch tasting, to be decided because I literally haven't figured out what the heck I'm doing yet. So until then, everyone, thank you very much.